Hello and welcome back. So today now we will be completing the module 3 knowledge check here. So task here for the module 3, the final task for our module. So let me just open it in a new tab. So we will be performing this lab tasks, sorry, knowledge checks here. From here we are on our module 3 knowledge check will be complete. So let me just wait for it to load and then we will start our module. So now to pass this module 3 knowledge check, we must score 70% or higher to complete the knowledge check. We have unlimited chances. The knowledge check has total 10 questions. So now to continue we will press the start button here. So now let us see at the question here. Which statement about the AWS identity and access management IAM is true? So from the options we have IAM provides encryption for data at rest and data in transit. With IAM, you can grant principals granular access to the console. IAM provides enhanced security by prohibiting federation from corporate systems such as Microsoft Active Directory. IAM provides auditing of who performed an action, what action they performed, and when they performed it. So from here, based on that, which statement about AWS identity access management is true? So with IAM, we can grant principals granular access to the console. And yes, it is correct. Now let's move on to the next question. Which option is considered a best practice to configure long-term access in AWS identity and access management control? So we have the options here are create a role, apply permissions, and then allow your staff members to assume that role. Create a new group with more specific conditions and then assign it to a parent group. Attach IAM policies to IAM groups and then IAM users to the IAM groups, and attach IAM policies to IAM group users and then assign IAM users to the IAM groups. So I think so from here it is attach IAM policies to IAM groups and then assign IAM users to the IAM groups. This can be a lot of tricky type question, as most of us will get mixed up with users and groups here. I think C option is correct. Let me check. Yes, it is correct. So now let's move on to the next question. Which statement best describes an AWS identity and access management role? So it is a role is a person or application that can authenticate with an AWS account. A role is an identity that is used to grant a temporary set of permissions to make AWS service requests. A role is a document that defines which resources users can use. And a role is an identity that is used to grant a permanent set of permissions to make AWS service requests. So I think a role that is used to grant a set of permissions and grant a temporary. I think it's this one. I think so. Temporary set of permissions to make AWS service requests. So let me check. Yes, that is correct. Now let's move on to the next question. Which method will achieve multi-factor authentication here? Require an access key to authenticate programmatically. To require an access key ID and a secret access key to authenticate programmatically. Require an access key and an authentication code from a hardware device. Require a username and password to authenticate programmatically. So I think so it is require an access key and an authentication key from a hardware device. This is one of the strong options. I am achieving it from a multi-factor. I think so. Let me check. Yes, that is correct. Which statement regarding AWS identity and access management or IAM policies is true? Permissions boundaries are used to grant permissions within a specified AWS region. identity-based policies are attached to resources and grant permissions to the principal that is specified in the policy. By default, any actions or resources that aren't explicitly denied by a policy are allowed. Resource-based policies are attached to resources and grant permissions to the principal that is specified in the policy. I think okay, this is identity, and I think it is mostly focused upon the resource-based policies. Yes, that is correct. An administrator has decided to use inline policies to improve their organization's security posture. Which statement about inline policies is true? Inline policies are a form of service control policy. Inline policies provides features such as reusability, central change management, and versioning. Inline policies are based based on identity based policies that AWS creates and manages. Inline policies are an embedded inherent part of a principal entity such as a user role or a group role. So I think inline policies are for the question number 6. I think inline policies are embedded inherent part of an entity of a principal entity and such as a user group or role. Let me just check. Okay, that is correct. Thank God. So now let's move on to the next question. Which method would provide identity federation, implement multi-factor authentication and require the use of a virtual authentication device, implement AWS Cloud Trail which provides log records that include the identity information of users who request resources on your account, implement AWS single sign-on SSO which supports secure interactions between an identity provider and a service provider, implement AWS organization and organize accounts in a hierarchical manner through the use of organizational units. So I think it's implement AWS single sign-on SSO which supports secure interactions between an identity provider and a service provider. Yes, that is correct. So now let us move on to the next question, which AWS service relies on user pools and identity pools. Amazon organizations which provides the ability to hierarchically organize your assets by using organizational units. Amazon Cognito which provides authentication, authorization and user management for mobile and web applications. AWS Cloud Trail which provides log records that include the identity information of users who request resources in your account. AWS Directory Service which provides the ability of directory aware workloads and AWS resources to use managed Microsoft Active Directory in the AWS cloud. So relies on user pools and identity pools. I think Amazon Cognito which provides authentication, authorization and user management for mobile and web based applications. That is correct. Which statement about AWS organization is true? You can nest organizational units or use within other OUs up to a depth of 7 levels. Organizations replaces AWS Identity and Access Management IAM by overriding the granular control that IAM provides to the account level. Organizations uses service control policies SCPs to grant permissions for member accounts within an organization. With organizations, you can attach policies for each OU for fine-grained policy creation and application. So I think with organizations you can attach policies. Yes, we can do that to each OU organization units for fine-grained policies, creations and applications. Yes, that is correct. Which service does AWS Identity Access and Management IAM rely on to provide temporary security credentials for roles? AWS Security Token Service, AWS STS, Amazon Cognito, Amazon Organizations, or AWS CloudTrail. So I think it is AWS Security Token Services, AWS STS, which provides the services and rely on to provide temporary security credentials for roles like user roles or admin roles. Okay, correct. From here, all of 10 out of 10 questions of ours are correct. So our score is 100 points, and I've secured full marks here. Now, for the next modules, we will meet for in knowledge checks for the next module, along with the lab task, which is also in the module 4. And till I see you next time. Wish you all the best and have a good day. Thank you.